Yeah, we're live, 7:42. We'll be a little shorter tonight. But tonight we want to talk about head flow. I get lots of questions. Now we know, so right off the bat, look, ported heads are good. Aftermarket heads are good for anything. A small block Chevy, small block Ford. The photo that I have up for the thumbnail is a small block Chevy, has airflow research heads on. Those are excellent. So if you are trying to make lots of power, having lots of head flow helps. It makes life easier. If you're trying to make build a race motor where you're making lots and lots of power, then they're mandatory. They're going to be critical. So we've talked a lot about, hey, if you've got a 300 CFM head, you can make 600 horsepower or more, because that's kind of the way that the math works out. It will support that much power. In fact, it'll support more than that, but you really got to be on your game. I mean, we're talking about, really high compression, really, really big cams, lots of RPM, short runner stuff, dry sump motors, all kinds of tricks, shaft rockers and all kinds of things. So to really, really get the specific outputs up where we're talking about more than 2 horsepower per peak CFM when we're talking about cylinder head flow. But that's not the question. We know that. Lots of head flow, lots of RPM, Formula One, Pro Stock, Australian touring, all of the great stuff, all of that works. But that's not the question. The question for tonight is, and I get this a lot, particularly if we do some sort of cylinder head test or whatever, or even if we don't put cylinder heads on it, people want to know about that. So like, for instance, when I ran that L33, the aluminum 5.3, or any LS motor, any stock LS motor, but the 5.3 had 799 heads on it. Those have enough flow. Those flow pretty well. They flow enough to probably support 480 to 500 horsepower NA. And we've made those kinds of numbers on a 6-liter with lots of camshaft in it with those heads. But the question is, okay, Richard, I got a 5.3 and I'm putting a low buck truck camshaft in it. So, okay, that's a good, good choice for a driver, get stock converter use. Guy drives around. It has good average power, good torque. It does all those good things. Okay. Now they want to know, okay, should I port the head? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. The consideration really isn't, there are a number of considerations. The main consideration isn't just, does it make power? Yes. If you take a 799 head, a 706 head, a 241 head, a 317 head, any of the stock heads, if you put airflow research heads on it, trick flow heads, any of the other PRC heads, any of the other aftermarket heads that are designed for that bore size, when we're talking about a 5.3, could be a 6.0, whatever, and you have ported heads and they flow more, they flow, instead of 240 or 250 like a stock head does on the LS, they flow 260, 270, 300, 320, or 330, whatever a really good cathedral port head, whatever the one that you choose can flow. So it can support a lot of power. The question is, yes, the head can support that power, but the other question is it going to do that on your application? So like we had the airflow research heads on that small block Chevy. If you got a mild small block Chevy, you got a 350 or whatever, and you've got airflow research heads on it, the 195s like we're showing there, those made over 550 horsepower because they have enough head flow to do that. And we did that on a small block. But on the motor that on most of the 350s that we run, they're like 400 horsepower or even sub 400 horsepower motors. So when you're looking at the needs for the cylinder head, like I said, it will always make it easier. You'll always make a little bit more power, sometimes not a big amount. And then therein lies the question. So you're going to go to either porting like your stock heads, which is a viable deal, especially if you do it yourself. There's no cost there. Then you just do it. And maybe you got to do a valve job or whatever. That works good. But if you're going to step up to either ported stock heads or an aftermarket head, and you want to upgrade it, but you're running a mild cam like we were talking about with our 5.3, could be a small block Chevy, Ford, whatever. But if we're talking about a 5.3, you got a low buck truck camshaft in, you got springs in it on whatever head you're going to put on there. Do I need more head flow? You don't need anything. So right off the bat, you just put the cam and springs in there, put injectors in there, get it tuned. You're going to be happy with that. You're not going to know unless somebody like Richard did a test where they made a bunch more power by doing each of these steps that we go through in the thing. You wouldn't know that. Like if we made 10 more horsepower and you didn't get that and you didn't know that was there, you would never know. You'd just go out and drive around, you'd have fun, and you'd be happy and healthy and driving around and doing burnouts and stuff. But the question is, okay, should I put ported heads on there? Hard for me to answer because ported heads can make a lot more power. A couple things. First of all, do you want to go to the expense of doing that? Do you want to either port the stock heads or buy aftermarket heads? Do you have the money to do that? And then the secondary question is, if we're looking at it at cost versus like the benefit that you get, if you get a good set of heads, like I said, they'll support 600 plus horsepower on the case of a good set of LS heads. They'll support a lot of power. You're not going to make that though. If you have a 5.3 with a low buck truck camshaft in it and you put ported heads on it, you're just not going to make that much power. I mean, you have to have everything else to make a lot of power. So if you have a 5.3 and you get a low buck truck camshaft, that's going to put you between 400 and 425 at the flywheel, the way that we tested with headers and no accessories and all that stuff. So put it about right there. Ported heads, I don't know, maybe they get you to 450 or something like that, but only not because the heads won't do that, because they won't support that. They will. You don't have enough camshaft in it, and you also don't have enough intake manifold in it. So maybe they get you a little higher than that, but not a lot. If we wanted to go and get near the 500 horsepower mark for 5.3s that everybody wants for their NA things, we got to run a lot bigger camshaft in it. And it's not that the head, has to work with some magic valve events. It's just that the cam is bigger and it wants to make more power. So now the cylinder head, now the combination can utilize what the cylinder head has available, because a smaller cam, you're not doing that. With a 212 cam, that's a mild cam. It's designed to make power, power in the range that we normally talk about. It's not designed to make power, big power out of the top. And it's not designed to trade a bunch of power, because that's what's going to happen if we go from the 212 low buck truck camshaft to a 230 or a 235 at 50 camshaft, where we have a minimal amount, like a whisker of piston to valve clearance, like the BTR stage 4 cam, the LS3 cam that we use, or the Summit stage 4, so some kind of big cam that's 230 to 235 at 50. You're just not going to have a lot of piston to valve clearance, and you're going to make power way at the top of the RPM range, and then you're going to trade power down low. And you're also going to have to team that. Now that you have the ported heads and you put this theoretical big camshaft in there, you got to have a lot of intake flow, and not just flow, but also intake runner length designed to run and optimize power in the RPM range where that cam wants to run, and now can run. The motor can run up there and make power, because now it has the cam, it has the head flow. And if you combine that with the intake manifold, you could do all that, but it takes all that. So if you put something like the low buck truck camshaft, again, if we sell lots of them and lots of people like them and are driving around with them because they work great for what most people are doing. But putting ported heads on that is not going to give you the huge power, because you don't have the rest of the things to go along with it. So we see this on the LS3 example that I always use. You put ported LS3 heads on it, even on an LS3, a 6.2 that has high compression, has a really good intake manifold already. If you put it on a stock one that has a stock mild camshaft in it, which a LS3 cam is, in terms of specs, is not too far removed, at least the intake duration, from the low buck truck camshaft. It doesn't make nearly that much power. No, not yet. It doesn't make nearly that much power, but it's just not big enough to take advantage of on an LS3. Not big enough to take advantage of what's there stock, and certainly not able to take advantage of what's there when we port them and now they flow 340 or 350 or whatever they flow. You're just not going to take advantage of it. You have to have all of those things to take advantage of what the cylinder head is capable of. So going back to our original question, our original problem, the premise is, hey, look, should I port these heads? Yes, but know going in that you're going to get, the gains are going to be much smaller than they would be if you had all the other things, and quite honestly, a bigger motor than a 5.3, or in the case of a 350 Chevy, you go from a 350 to a 383. The 383 needs more head flow and can take advantage of the more head flow. So you put Airflow Research 195 heads on a 383, it's going to work out a lot better. Because and also on a 383, you probably wouldn't put quite as small of a camshaft in there because it's a 383. It'll tame the cam down a little bit. You could get away with a little bit bigger cam. You got the head flow. You put probably a dual plane RPM air gap like most people do. Maybe you want to put a single plane on there, put more camshaft in there, and you can do that later on. You could step up to that after you've enjoyed driving around with all of the good things that are the dual plane and milder cam with a set of airflow research heads, that you would be enjoying on a 383. And then you think, well, you know what I want to do now? I've driven around on that and I like that. And I can spin the tires and have all the fun. But what I want now is I want this thing to RPM. Okay, well, you got good heads. You got a 383. That's fine. Put a single plane on it. Put a bigger camshaft in it. You probably already have roller rockers and then put the right springs on it and stuff. And then you can go, hey, look, I'm not making peak power at 6,000 anymore. I'm making peak power at 7,000. Now it revs out and still sounds great. So you have with the heads, if you did step up to good heads, like the airflow research heads or trick flows or whatever, even ported stock ones in a lot of cases, although not ported stock ones, usually on a stock small block or on a small block Ford. I don't know how much they're getting. I'm sure that there are guys that are magic guys out there that are getting lots and lots of flow from stock, whatever Ford heads, but the amount of work that you have to put into that, it's just so much easier. And they're iron. So just go get an aluminum set of something like airflow research heads 185s or something like that. Just put them on there and just be done with it. And you're going to be kind of happy. But that's the thing. We want, we want the ported heads because we got a mild cam. Well, I put ported heads on it and then I'll be making 500 horsepower. No, you don't have a 500. You might have 500 plus horsepower heads, but you don't have a 500 horsepower cam. You don't have a 500 horsepower intake manifold. And especially at that displacement, like you could get closer with a 6-liter or something in the case of an LS, or get closer with a 383 instead of the 350 or anything below that, a 327, 302, 307, 265, whatever, the kinds of small blocks and stuff that you'd be running there. So it's important to know that going in. If you want more head flow, yes, it will help, and it's not going to hurt anything. And so it will help. It's just that with a mild camshaft, it's not going to help a lot. So don't expect like huge things. In some instances, like with the LS, it's already an aluminum head. So you're going from aluminum head to aluminum head. But in the case of a small block Ford or small block Chevy, you're going from an iron head to aluminum head. It's almost worth it just for that. So, and also the thing that you would be doing like on an LS, you're not going to gain a lot because it already has a good cylinder head to begin with. But on a small block Chevy or a small block Ford, not good cylinder heads. So an airflow research head upgrade on that is worth way more than it might be on an LS, particularly with a small cam. And on the small block Ford, we see that also. It will be worth more even with that small cam because the stock heads are so bad. So it depends on a lot of things. Depends on whether or not you're, which engine family you're doing it on. And then, how the combination is that you're adding the cylinder heads to. So it's up to you. Do you want to spend the money on 10 horsepower or 20 or whatever the number is? So we'll have a poll. A mild. Okay, would you add ported or aftermarket heads to a mild cammed daily driver? Is that for you? I should have said, would you spend the money on the ported or aftermarket heads? Because that's really the thing here. Late start. Yeah, we did get a little bit of late start. Greetings, everyone. Winston, Getaway, Jordan, LT1. Video thumbnail is always king. Mouth cam instead of 317 heads for the street. Yeah, I don't know that I would pick 317s. Is it possible to run the L83, L86 intake on the LS LT hybrid so I can utilize the direct injection? I want the BTR intake, but it's $1,000. Yes, you can. If you're putting LT heads on it, you have to run an LT intake manifold. Lunchbox is in the house. We have tech talk. Yes, we do. Todd, what's going on? Heads flow too much for your cam. You just need a bigger cam. So you don't have too much head flow. You just have not enough camshaft. 238, 248, 50, 540, 496, AFR enforcers, tunnel ram. Runs very strong in my boat for being told that 335s are too big. Yeah, we know that that's not the case because I've run 315s versus, I think they're 315s versus 335s and made exactly the same power. Yeah, not Todd. Yeah. What do you consider a mild cam? Would sloppy stage 3 be considered mild? No, not compared to what I was talking about. I was talking about like a 212 cam. Sloppy stage 3 cam is a lot bigger than that. What's the highest horsepower you've seen from a 5.3 NA? The one that I did made 542. The one that Brian did 550 with his heads on it. I've never tried to do the most. All of those are stock bottom ends. So those are just heads, cam, and intake kind of thing. Those heads are kind of big for a 540 lift roller cam. Shane, don't listen to him. That's not true. But in all seriousness, the heads flow great to 1-inch lift. Probably not the best choice if your cam only has 500 lift. The flow is not optimized for low lift. Yeah, if it has a really big 1-inch lift number, my guess is the low lift stuff is not going to be great. But those 335 heads are really good, though. You can send your stock LS heads to Rick Kemp and have them port them. Yeah, there's lots of guys that do porting. K-Tech has them. I mean, everybody does. If I go 350 plus CCs on a 468 big block, would that be too much head flow? Well, you're talking about a port volume there and not head flow. So I'm not worried about port volume if the head flow is going up commensurate with the change in size. How about the Truck Plus cam with 660 springs, LMG true dual exhaust, stock exhaust manifold, stock cat, and a third cat gone? John, I don't know. I don't remember seeing what that application was for. I'd need to know what you're trying to achieve. Gen 5 LT1 NA car, smaller ports for velocity like CID versus bigger ports, valves for horsepower. I don't look at it that way either. I don't think that that's the thing. There are ways. I mean, the only way to do it really is put it on the dyno. You could do all the measurements because I did that when we did all the head testing. So we measured all of the port volumes. We measured all the valve sizes so that we could calculate coefficient of discharge. You know, we did the chamber volumes. We did and the chamber itself, the chamber design, especially after it's ported, has a big effect on power. Brian was talking a lot about that in the thing, in the interview that I did. And that's all very important. But big port versus small port for velocity, and you can get into tiny little esoteric things, but you don't know that that's going to be the case. You have to look at where the thing flows, how it flows, and where it flows at the different valve lists. You have to compare that to port volume is just one thing, but not just port volume, because maybe the port is longer or shorter than another one. So the relative volume inside is not giving you a true indication of what's going on. Also, what's the choke point? What's the curtain area with the valve down? There's so many things there, but ultimately you can do all that stuff and do all that math. The only way you're going to tell whether one head is better than another head is to put it on the dyno and run it. You could put it in the car and run it at the track or whatever, but you have to measure it and see. And so you take all of that data and go, I think this is going to happen. And then you have to see if it happens. And then if it does happen, you go, okay, well, it looks like this is a good correlator. You got to do that more than once to find a causal thing, but you have a correlation possibly. But if you have to do that a bunch and find out if that works, but then if it doesn't work, then you have to figure out, well, okay, I had all this data and thought it was going in this direction. and it didn't. So why didn't it go in that direction? Now you got to go back and look and figure things out. Have you tested or have you heard good results from running AFR LS Enforcer heads out of the box, either cathedral or square port? If you're talking about the LS3 heads, yeah, they're very, very good. Oh, I thought you were, I take that back. Talking about Mongoose stuff. Yeah, the Enforcer stuff should work really well. They've run them a bunch at WestTech. And what engine family are you talking about? Have you tested mass black label small bore heads? I need to go back and look. I've run 3 or 4 different black label heads, but I don't remember if we did small bore ones. I'd have to go back and look. I wonder if the C8 Z06 heads would benefit from porting, or if anyone has measured flow on them. Achieve stoichiometric combustion the best way we can for what we got from yesterday's talk about the LTs. Crazy how the Z06s have that old racing tech of an add injector spring from the exhaust side. Not that I felt that the car needed any more power. I've been told that the Brodex BB3 Extra 363 heads are too big for my 540. That would be better off on a 572 or 632. I've been told the 323.3 is better and make more power. So I would want to see, well, and it depends on, like, every 540 is not the same. So if you had a 540, let's take a 500-inch motor. If you have a 500-inch Pro Stock motor, do you think that the 363 is still too small? The answer is no, it's not. So it's not, this is just like saying that a carburetor is too big or too small based on displacement. That's not accurate. You got to look at the power output. How much power are you trying to make? And can you take advantage of the flow potential of those heads? Do you have the rest of the things that do that? So that's not a fault of the head. That's just you don't have the rest of the stuff. Let's see. If you got a mildly oversized head and great mid and high lift flow numbers, does increasing cam lift help with short duration? I don't know. I don't know that those two things give you the answer that you're looking for. I don't know that more flow at 600 lift, that maybe did it go up from 550 lift to 600 lift? Did it stay the same there? Did it drop? What's happening with the head? I don't know that necessarily putting rockers on there is going to get you what you want because you've added lift. The test that we did didn't show much of a change in lift. It showed some. And then on some applications where you're trying to max things out, but you only have, in this case, when they did the test on, I think it was on a rec port head application, they went from like low to mid 600 lift to 700 lift. And they picked up a lot of power on that. But again, they had a motor that could utilize the extra flow potential of them giving them the extra flow potential. Finally fired up my LQ4 with ported 243 sloppy stage 3 cam, but it didn't get an intake yet. So rocking. How did you fire it up without an intake? Still rocking a Trailblazer SS. It's going to be my bottleneck. Your bottleneck for what? I don't know how much power you're trying to make. That's not the biggest cam that you could put in there. That's not the most powerful cam that you put in there by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't know what you're trying to do. I've had heads with my mild cam. I argue for the displacement. It's mild anyway. It's a small block Ford. Yes, I'm putting heads on it, period, like you said. Yeah, a small block Ford head. You can't hardly go wrong not switching out those stock heads. Importing E7 TEs. best effort. Yeah, if you can make them better, maybe you can get 20 or 30 CFM or something. That's all beneficial. Especially it's beneficial when you have a situation where you don't have anywhere near enough flow. And so you look like a hero getting more flow in there. Trick flow high ports for a stock cam small block forward. I ran those on my Mustang. Wonder how much flow power the Edelbrock TR2X can support before it comes to restriction. Dennis has a number 2 cylinder misfire he's working through. I wouldn't do heads until at least a 225 duration or bigger, especially on a smaller LS like a 5.3 or a 4.8. Sadly, I have a 4.3 in my single cab. Those are good motors, though. How about a pair of Promax 215 heads on a 383 for marine application? Yeah, none of the things that you told me there, like the port volume and the valve size, they don't tell me what I would need to know. I would need to know airflow, and then what kind of power that 383 is going to make. Probably not a lot, given that peak RPM and that it's a marine application. So I'm imagining you have a fairly mild cam in it. Could you do a video on the 6.6 L8T? I don't have any of those, so that's probably not going to happen unless I go back. I think Brian had one. Are aftermarket ASCAS heads worth it over CNC ported GM castings? Stuck between PRC 225 heads and PRC stage 2.5 LS6 heads. The ASCAS TrickFlow 220s are definitely a lot better than any factory casting. And the other with a twin turbo setup. Yeah, I'm not going to run an L8T with that. I wish the truck BTR hybrid intake was a little more affordable. If it was 1,000 with a throttle body, that'd be awesome. An LS 6 liter with 823 heads and LS intake, which cams might you suggest for a turbo application? I'm looking to make 600 wheel horsepower, but capable of making 800. You should put a low buck truck camshaft in it, because you shouldn't worry about the power output. The cam doesn't dictate that. I think we've been through this a bunch of times. you can that power output you can make with a stock cam. Put a low buck truck camshaft in it. Doesn't matter that you have 823 heads. You can run any cylinder head on a 6 liter and make 600 or 800 wheel horsepower. Very, very easy. You can do that on a 5.3. So none of that matters. Just you would pick the camshaft for what else you want it to do. Do you want it to drive around? Do you want it to have good boost response? That kind of stuff. Australia, 351 Cleveland, stock 4V heads or aftermarket 3V aluminum. Well, the 3V stuff, the CHI stuff is really, really good. It's a much better cylinder head than a stock 4V is. But again, if you already have the 4V heads, you got to consider that. And can you just get the power that you want out of the 4V head? Is it a closed chamber head? Is it open chamber head? The 3V stuff is aluminum. It's going to be better, but because it's lighter also. How long do you think a 450 horsepower 6 liter with an untouched 4L60 will last? I don't know how long the transmission will last. The engine will last forever. Brooks heads flow 399. They flow 400 CFM at 600 lift, 430 at 700, 433 at 800. So I'm looking at cams. That range, just need to figure out a good duration and LSA for my heads. Yeah, that's not the way I would do it. You need the duration is going to be a function of what RPM you want to run. How much power are you trying to make? Are you trying to make everything that those heads will make? Like, are you trying to make 850 or 900 horsepower? And do you have the rest of the things to do that? Just want to make a 4.3 sound like a V8, and that's kind of hard to do. Any chance on testing more big block stuff? Yeah, I have some more big block stuff that I'm going to run. I'll be AFR 315 CNC on my 565 boat. Yeah, the 315s made the same as the 335s did when I tested them, and I ran them. We ran them NA, and we also ran them with a roots blower on it. Like 700 at the tire, so probably need to make 800 to 825 at the crank. Okay, so you're going to have to. What was that? What size motor was that? Zoo truck, what size was that? Just a heads up, if you came across a Titan 5.6 injector, grab it. They're getting followed now. I saw the one video of the Titan thing making a lot of power. So if that's what you're referencing, I don't, there's no cams for those and there's no heads for those and stuff. But it is a V8 and it is a fairly efficient V8 to begin with. So if you put ring gap in it and the heads flow okay, and maybe there are some Kelford cams or something for that somebody did, and you add turbos to it, you obviously can make a lot of power. What about overporting dual plane intakes? I just saw Big Dog stage 2 air gap manifold for a 306. I don't know what overporting would be. I don't know what that is. Can you expect low end to fall out due to bigger ports? They claim 300 CFM. It would depend on what they're doing to the port to make it flow that much. Don't know if the Trailblazer SS is hurting me. Not hurt. I wouldn't look at it like it's hurting you. There are intakes that will definitely make more power. A fast manifold, an LSXR or an LSXRT, will definitely make more than a Trailblazer SS. So will other manifolds, but they'll usually trade power somewhere else. What's the Chevy motor that has a combustion chamber on the pistons? Is that the 409? We're boring out an LQ4 to 4065, putting L8T rotating, assembling it with boost. We'll talk more about it once it's done. Why would you go out to 4065 on an LQ4 block to do that if you're adding boost? Cam to 5400, peak on the marine application 383 with a goal of 425 to 550 is like, that's way too big of a range to talk about. that's not a thing. It has to be one or the other. Because a camshaft for 550 horsepower and on a marine application at 5,400 is not going to happen. Not on a 383. 450, or in that range is probably much more doable. It's got a pair of AFR 195 eliminator comp ports. Nice. Full roller, 3.3, 10.5 to 1. Cam is a 294, 300. What is the, Matt, what is the duration at 50? Ron, you want us to go back and cover everything that you missed? What would be the drawback of running ported heads on a mild camshaft, low RPM? No, there's no downside really. It's just that if you spend the money on the conversation was if you spend the money on ported heads and you don't get like huge power because you don't have the rest of the things to take advantage of the ported heads, did you waste your money? Okay, yeah, Mark, 425 to 450. Yeah, realistic. Otherwise, that's a big spread. Yeah, that's not hard to do at all. That's like I think probably with that, you could run a 218 or 224 kind of intake duration camshaft. What would be your preferred cylinder head and camshaft for 1500 horsepower LS? I don't think I would have one that I would use. You could use any of 1,000 different camshafts for that. And we've done that with ported 317s. We've done it with trick flow heads. You could do it with, any of the cylinder heads, any good cylinder head. I would pick the cylinder head not for flow or anything. 1,500 horsepower is just boost. It's not going to be hard at all. Making the power is not hard. Getting it to live and putting it down and all that stuff is going to be the difficulty. We did it with a 228 comp cam. We did it with a 231 comp cam. We did it with a BTR. I don't remember what the twin turbo thing was, but it was in the 220 to 230 range. Also, any of those kinds of cams will be fine for that. The camshaft won't stop you from making 1,500 horsepower. And for heads, I would look at the head more in terms of deck thickness. You just want it to be able to seal. Speaking of junkyards, a pick and pull. They had a Chevy truck with painless harness and aluminum-headed LT1. Oh, nice. I would assume, much like you have too much cylinder head or too much camshaft, I would assume you could give up low end if you port too much. Well, if you port it and you get gains from the porting, the fact that you've increased the size is okay. But I've done lots of port volume tests where the flow went up with port volume. You could get to a point where you're hurting low lift flow, and maybe that would hurt low speed power. And maybe part throttle would be sacrificed more. What's the most reliable power you can make on a stock 5.362 crank under turbo boost? I want to do the Summit LS forged crank and rods, but save money on a crank for other things. You don't need a forged crank. If you're running a stock block, you don't need a forged crank. Just put rods and pistons in it, and you can make whatever you think you can tune to. Mercury Marine 502 board, 4500, 425 stroke, 540 Pontiac Bonneville. Okay. $241, $247 at 50. That's a good size cam. $241, $247. Okay. Yeah, I would think that could be 500 horsepower, maybe a little more than that. How much power did you make with your Mustang? I have a 363 with a 240 high port and a 700 solid roller. I'm looking to make 1,000 horsepower with the YSI. The YSI will support that, so that shouldn't be too hard. We did more than 1,000 horsepower with a 363, but we did it with a single turbo on it. I don't remember running the blower up on the. I'd have to go back and look. I don't think we ran the VORTECH up that high on the on that 363. Mine was only had forged pistons in it, but had stock rods and had trick flow heads and a 302. And we had an A trim and a B trim, and then I ran an R trim on it for just a little bit. I don't think we ever ran it, and we ran testing on the dyno. Don't think we ran it over about 650 or something on my motor from my Mustang. Other ones we did. Well, cam could just match the flow of the stock head, so I'll say no to new heads unless you get a new cam to match the new heads. I picked up 87 3500. Nice. He's looking at an LSX RT or high ram. I don't want to give up the torque down low. Well, the nice thing is the LSX RT or the LSXR, you don't give up the torque. With a high ram, you're definitely going to, compared to your Trailblazer SS. I like to see Gen 5 LT1. I think you'd be surprised on how much more power than the LS they make with direct injection. I have seen endless dyno testing with them. I ran an L83, and that's a lot better than a 5.3 LS. Brian's run endless LT1, L86, and all the variants, LT4 stuff. He's ran a bunch of testing, so I have all of that data. But it's still, in no way would it ever make me want one of those over an LS. It's an old boat motor going a 60s land yacht. There you go. Friending knock with his computers is astonishing. 2Js designed to withstand knock. Now the new tech on 2Js. You want velocity, not flow, for a daily driver. Richard, have you done a test comparing rec port Super Victor intake versus a Holley split plane? The split intake manifold wasn't out. At least the one from Holley wasn't out when they did all the big intake shootouts. I don't think I've compared a Super Victor to that. We did compare it to the mast version, which I would think is probably better than the Holley one is, because it was all CNC ported. If the L33 LT hybrid made 506, what would a re-sleeved L33 with L86 ported heads and a BTR truck hybrid intake make? I don't know. There are guys making, I think, I know in the high 800s, and it might be over 900 by now, with 6.2 versions of NA LT motors. So I don't know about a 427. It could be a lot more. I'm sure I'm overthinking it. We're attaching twin 62s, F33 plus, blow-through setup. Yeah, that'll be fine. LQ465 over, L8T crank. Okay. Yeah, I just don't know why you go to the, I mean, for an NA one, I might think about doing that. For a boosted one, I would absolutely not take a LQ4 block to 65 over. Hate to harm boost response. Yeah, a 233 cam with a single plane, not going to be very responsive. What do you think of the V3 supercharger for a 383? Here, I need some carb to run it with. What would you recommend? Yeah, the CSU blow through carbs or Quick Fuel, I think, makes blow through carbs for that. I prefer high compression NA engines. Yeah, so what size motor for the Broix heads? Yeah, no, I got that. I saw your video with the L92, the Stage 4 Summit cam, but it wasn't clear if I need to worry about clearance. It fit in the motor that we put it in. I don't even remember measuring piston to valve clearance on that. But I think that Brian Nutter from Summit told me that that would clear. They were stock heads and not shaved. 85 blends good where you're at. I learned not going above 109 octane when blending due to leaded. Higher than that, sludge below E60 blends. I don't know what octane has to do with what you're talking about. What do you think the best bang for the buck engine to put an M122 supercharger on? The one that it came off of, probably. You run Alphabet cams in a 351 Windsor. Maybe way back we did. Those cams wouldn't be my choice unless you just found a really good deal on one. There are much better cams for that. My 440 Mopar solid roller, 660 lift, 282 at 50. At Port 706, I'd have 220 stainless valves. Tips of the valves are pitted. Having trouble finding replacement valves without spec. Any idea where I can get some? Ferrea or SI or Victory probably has titanium ones. I don't know why you would put a 220 valve in 706 heads. It's way too big for that chamber size. Do you mean a 202 stainless valve? Any history with AED carbs? I don't think we've run those. 306 Ford VS 7875. Yeah, that works. What boost level on Alice head she won't start to worry about THNX being an issue while studded? We worried about it doing the big bang stuff. I don't worry about it on any of the stuff that's 1,000 horsepower and less, but I don't know in between there where that's an issue. I bought an eBay 200cc small block Chevy head. I have Sue valve C grinder. I'm planning a boost. I'm wondering if I should go with the 202s or 208s. My worry is extra heat between the valves. If you're running boost, I wouldn't worry about the 208 valves. How much would it cost me for you to build me a Ford short block? That's not me. Like 10 minutes into the video and you answered a bunch of questions. Any experience with Hilborn injection or any mechanical injection? I've only been there. I've never tested any, but I have been there when Brule has run a bunch of them at WestTech. Okay. I just picked I just picked you a new 700 R4 from my Richard, so I'll have my truck up and running so far your tune works. So is the transmission a problem, Todd? We got would you add port or aftermarket heads to a mild cam daily driver? Oh, so like 70-30. Okay. We got 2 more minutes. I told you it was gonna be short. What's your favorite cylinder head for what? A ported 3-cylinder 1-liter Sprint head. Vanilla 6.2 and 11 truck. Put your low truck cam. What head will be better, a 799 or 823? The 823 will make more power than a 799 will. It will be softer down low than a 799. That has nothing to do with the camshaft and has everything to do with those cylinder heads. You want to take full advantage of a good set of heads with a mounted cam, you need to increase displacement. Canna-valve heads for LSs would be better than standard heads. Yeah, Brian Julie Racing has canna-valve heads. That's what we did on the interview I did with Brian. He was talking about his new canna-valve heads. Can you get billet heads for the Sprint? I know. I kind of want to take that head into Mohovitz and say, can you guys do a billet head? It's really small. It's only 3 cylinders. Because what I want to do, and I first thought about just welding the thing up and raising the port and, doing that kind of stuff. And maybe that could be done, but they made a 4-valve version of that motor in a 4-cylinder, not a 3-cylinder. And we were thinking about welding one of those up and making it a 3-cylinder 4-valve deal. What are your thoughts on Promax 317 heads for a marine application? For a 482 big block? Yeah, those heads work well, though. All the Promax heads that I've run have worked well. What do they flow? If do they flow? I'm sure that they got to flow 350 or something, right? That's way more than you need to make 580 out of a 482-inch big block. Favorite head is the B16. I do like B16s, but it would be a B16B though, or a B18C5. What kind of torque converter should I put behind the Summit Stage 4 cam? 2800 to 3000 probably. You could choose any stock head to modify or CNC port. I don't. You got to be specific about what engine family you're talking about. Put 706s on a truck Norris. I have some 799s as well. 799 is better when I want to throw a Magnuson on there. You're not at the limit of either one of those heads. So, and an LQ4 is a flat top or is a dish piston. So, I probably would put 799s on that and just give up some of the low speed power for that, especially if you're going to put a positive displacement blower on there. You're not going to be lacking for low speed power. What do you think of the new Summit Gen 1 blocks? I don't know. I need to ask Brian about those from Summit. I don't know anything about them. I poured my brother's Chevette head. He said it was the only one he knew that did 100 miles an hour. A stock Chevette won't go 100 miles an hour. I mean, don't they make more than 100 horsepower? Because that's all it needs is to go 100. What fuel works best with nitrous? For what power level? For my mild daily driver, 355, airflow 210s, 264, 274, 5,000 converter. That's quite a daily. You say is the limit of a 706 head? I don't know what you mean. What limit? Didn't shift out of first. Did you check the governor? Have you shifted heads to reduce intake valve shrouding with the block dowel? Have I shifted heads on the Sprint? We have trouble keeping valve seals alive in our B18 Honda. We endurance race. They start sucking oil after 30 hours of racing. Okay. Doing an engine that doesn't need peak power but needs to be revved out without exceeding 400 horsepower because of transmission limits. Based on your TPI test, I'm looking at a long runner intake. If you want one that revs, you don't need a long runner. You need a short runner. Andy, I've never run an L33 with a stock fuel injection, so I don't know the answer to your question. I know that we run a dual plane on it. It would make less than a 5.3 does. V6 Chevy Sprint on the salt goes 185. What was the summation of the too much head discussion? 5-liter stock bottom end, trick flow, stage 1, AFR Renegades, dual plane, 650. Where should my timing be at, and what power should I be making? Feels fun. It's got a dual plane on it, so it's probably going to want 35 degrees of total timing. Used to move the dowel pins way back, not recently though. Just buy better heads nowadays. Yeah. If a 5.3 with a cam and a blower isn't the limit of a 706 heads, then what is? It's let's talk about power, not a random cam or a random blower or whatever. You need to talk about power. You could make 1,500 horsepower with 5.3 heads. You just need a lot of boost to do it. Too much cylinder head is too much money. Camshaft lobe surface finish for cam on bucket. Have some GSXR cams with light rusting on the lobe tips. Have you done any nitriding on the and are these factory cams? They got to be really old then if they're factory GSR cams or GSXR. Oh, they're so they're. I was thinking that they're GSR cams or Honda cams. They're not. They're motorcycle cams. Thanks for the Lubbock truck cam package. 2 engines currently making 510 with current GM rec port. Cast iron heads, Promax 317 heads should get me to 580 without changing cams. 70 horsepower. I don't think you have enough camshaft for that. What's your go-to budget V8?